Appreciate everyone joining us today. If we haven't met or spoken before, my name is Derek McNeven. I'm responsible for business developments and partnerships here at StreamScan, and I'm here with my colleague Christopher. Christopher, why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah, so my name's Chris. I'm a CMMC RP here at StreamScan. We've helped over 30 companies. I think we're coming up on 40. With CMMC Level 2, we've done 5 CMMC Level 2 certifications with 100% success. We're actually doing one this week. We're in the middle of one this week, and we'll do another one next week as well. So by the end of next week, we'll be at 7 for the year, and we'll probably hit close to 20 or 25 by the end of this year.
I think 2026 is gonna be a busy year. I think for that, and as everyone logging in here knows that CMMC is top of mind for a lot of folks. They're either in the middle of the project now, maybe they've been thinking about starting. Hopefully not. Hopefully they already have. But I know it's top of mind for a lot of folks. So appreciate you taking time of your busy day to join us. You are familiar with today's topic. We're going to talk about CMMC technologies. So quickly kind of walk you through the agenda. We'll just share for those that don't know and a reminder for those that do, but who we are and what we do here at StreamScan. We'll touch on the timelines for CMMC and CPCSC. We know that's set in stone for CMMC and CPCSC. There's been a recent update here, and there's been some changes as it relates to the rollout of their timeline. So we'll give you the latest that we're aware of, and then we're going to talk about and get into the meat here a little more, but about CMMC audit from a C3PO assessor perspective. What's required to pass an audit, and then part of that is critical is clearly scoping your CUI, understanding what that is, understanding what your CUI assets are within your organization and IT environment, because that's the critical foundational piece to working towards CMMC compliance. And then we're going to talk about some of the challenges that we see as it relates to this with folks that we work with over the past 4 years on this. So Kristen has touched pretty much all of our CMMC compliance projects, so he has some insights here that he'll share with you. And when you're thinking about your CMMC environment and how you're managing that, many organizations we work with partners. So we'll talk about ESPs, or external service provider partners, in the CMMC world. And introduce, if you're not familiar with, the shared responsibility matrix, which is a critical component to that. And then just a couple of takeaways. We'll wrap it up, how we can help with this area, and some key takeaways from the presentation. And hopefully we'll try and make sure we have a few minutes for Q&A. If you do have any questions throughout the chat, feel free to write that in either the chat or the Q&A tab here, and we'll try and get to those. And if we can't, we can definitely follow up. We'll be sharing a follow-up to this presentation with the webinar, a copy of the presentation, and contact information as well. So a little bit about StreamScan. We've been around since 2011. We focus on operational cybersecurity. We primarily work with manufacturers in the aerospace, defense, and critical infrastructure sector. Excuse me. So we're a Canadian-based company. We're based in Montreal. All our team is here. All our tools and services are developed and delivered out of Canada. We have a team of about 40 cybersecurity experts that operate in different domains, whether it's compliance, members of our SOC doing development or R&D in our technologies. We've been working with AI for quite some time. I know it's a buzzword and everyone claims to be using it in some way, shape, or form, but we have patents that go back several years here, and that's an integral part of some of the solutions that we're bringing to market to help with the active monitoring piece. And we practice what we preach. So we are CMMC Level 2 certified. I believe, last I checked, we're the only managed security service provider in Canada that is CMMC Level 2 certified. Our organization's also been vetted by the Cyber AB as a RPO, registered provider organization. We have several folks on staff that have gone through formal training and have accreditation around CMMC as well. Chris obviously being one of those. And we are also ISO 27001 and SOC 2 Type 2 certified. And so just insights into our business, there's three pillars. So we can help organizations with strategic initiatives like the CMMC or any other compliance certification tied to cybersecurity, whether that be an ISO 27001, the Canadian standard, the CPCSE, or SOC 2 Type 2. Our core business is around operational cybersecurity. So we operate a SOC or Security Operations Center where we provide 24/7 monitoring for our customers. We're monitoring about 400,000 devices across Canada today, and the majority of those are for manufacturers, and many of them are defense contractors. And so our team can do that either with your tools. We can do that with StreamScan tools. We've developed our own technology through Building Canada Innovation Program at the CNRC several years back, which ultimately led us to doing projects with the DND, with the RCAF, with the Communication Securities Establishment, and what guided our business to focus on critical infrastructures and defense over the last several years. We can do pen testing and vulnerability scanning, things like that as well. And last but not least, we can help with operational resilience. So if you are experiencing any cyber security issues or attacks, we can help and intervene 24/7. So we do have an incident response service. We do not want to be here. We'd rather be preventing these issues for our customers, but sometimes that's how people find us, so we can support from that perspective as well. So jumping in here to timelines, Chris. So CMMC was launched November 10th, 2025. The screenshot here from the U.S. DoD or Department of War's CIO website. Very rare that you see on a government website the information that's written in capital letters, highlighted in yellow, written in red. And I think most people know that CMMC has launched. It does have a phased rollout period. Chris, can you talk about this a little bit?
Yeah, so as of November 10th, 2025, all new contracts that are coming out of the DoD will have CMMC level on it. So either it'll be level 1 or level 2. That's for the phase 1. So phase 2 next year, they will start going backwards on contracts. They will start going through their most critical contracts and start labeling them as CMMC requirements. You'll start seeing that, coming out as your DFARS 7021 requirements on your contracts, which will mandate a CMMC level on that specific contract. So as of next year, they'll start going backwards, and then we'll start asking for more level 2 certifications instead of just the level 1s. And then in 2027, they're going to start the level 3 assessments. So no need to worry about level 3 right now, unless the government has specifically reached out to you to pursue level 3. Those are for only their most critical projects, and they will reach out to you because the audit is not done by C3PAO, it's done by the actual government itself. So that'll be in 2027, and then 2028, it'll be every single contract that comes out of the DoD or Department of War or whatever they will be called at that time. They will mandate on every single contract, even though the contract's been out maybe 20 years, they'll go back and mandate it as CMMC level 1, 2, or 3. So that is the complete rollout will be in 2028, and that's their plan right now.
Yeah, thanks for that, Chris. And so the Canadian program is a little bit different, right? And it's perhaps a step behind the US in terms of the timeline. There was an industry engagement session around the fall. There's a recent update on the timeline that was shared as well. So, Chris, can you share what that looks like on the Canadian side?
Yeah, so the phase 1 has started here or there. They kind of started talking about it, but it will officially start March 2026. They will create their platform that you can go and make your self-assessment for level 1. Now, compared to the US version, in Canada, you must go through level 1 before you go to level 2. Whereas in the US, you can go immediately to level 2. So that'll be available starting in March. They don't have a confirmed date yet, but they are planning to release that in March. Next year, they will start on level 2. The auditors will start to come into play later this year. They will start choosing them. People will start going through certifications and that process to become auditors for the CPCSE program, and that'll start next year. And then in 2027 will be a full rollout like the US, but will be just a little bit ahead. And they will also talk about the level 3 a little bit more, but right now you're looking at 2027 for it to be a full rollout.
Yeah, and I think, Chris, correct me if I'm wrong, but similarly, level 3 will be led, the assessment side will be led by DND, the government directly. And you mentioned a critical piece here for the level 2 rollout. Need to establish the assessment frameworks for Canadian entities. StreamScan, we've raised our hand to participate in that, to be an assessor. Our goal, for all intents and purposes, is to help support organizations implement what's required, but we can also potentially in the future support certification. So coming back to the CMMC, what do we need to pass a CMMC level 2 audit, right? And there's folks that look at this, it's not necessarily an IT project. It's not necessarily just a cybersecurity project, right? It's a compliance framework. So there's a compliance aspect as well that really encompasses these 3 components. So yes, some technologies are required and critical to help you meet the required subcontrols to be compliant, but just deploying the tool doesn't mean you're compliant, right? So Chris, can you just touch on this a little bit, what auditors are kind of looking for?
Yeah, so they obviously want to look that your documents are done properly. They comply to the NIST 800-171 revision 2. They want to make sure that your policies support the SSP, and they want to make sure that you're actually doing the work. But what they really, really look at in depth is, do you know what you're talking about? And are you guys following that procedure? Is it something that you're going to stop, the second you pass that audit? Is really the things that they look at. They want to make sure that the company has decided as a whole to make a change, not just in technology or in the cybersecurity, but in the way that you process information, the way that you access information. That's their biggest goal, right? That's the biggest goal of the CMMC project as well, is to make sure that CUI, all those documents that are part of the CUI umbrella, they stay confidential.
Yeah, and that's core, right? That's the foundational piece to the compliance framework itself. It's not about sandboxing your IT. It's about putting the guardrails around that sensitive data or CUI once you have it in your possession. So just generally, Chris, just briefly want to touch on some of the organizational challenges that we see, right? You mentioned auditors are looking for buy-in from the executive team and the organization. And I think that's a critical piece to moving these types of projects forward as well, because it does involve quite a few stakeholders. So if you look at the first kind of column here, interpretation, right? There's tons of links here that we pulled that from the DoD CIO website. So there's the assessment guides, the scoping guide. There's hundreds, if not thousands, of pages here of documentation that our team is familiar with, but for a lot of folks, that's it could be a little scary when you're looking at that, right? So Chris, share from a knowledge, experience, and bandwidth perspective, the challenge aside from just becoming familiar with what CMMC is. What are the biggest problems that we're seeing people face?
Yeah, so the difficulty that we see a lot in the market is, one, understanding what the auditors are really looking for. If you look at just the NIST 800-171, the revision 2 document, it doesn't give you the whole picture. If you look at the auditor document, so the A document, NIST 800-171A, gives you a little bit more. And then there's an assessment guide that the auditors use to do that procedure with you. So you need to be familiar with all those documents. And that's just for level 2. If you're doing level 1, if you have to submit your score to the SPRS, there's right here in this document, I think there's almost 20 documents that are part of this CMMC ecosystem. So that's a huge deal for a lot of companies, that they don't understand the language, they don't understand what the auditors are really looking for, and they don't understand that the auditors will go and check not just the revision 2 document, but they're really going to look at the assessment objectives and break them down. So you might look at one control, but behind that control, there might be 7 assessment objectives behind. And if you have one that is not met, automatically you fail that control. So that's a big piece that a lot of companies don't know. And the second one is having enough time to put this together. We know, meeting with a lot of companies and going through this many times, that the IT directors, they're already working 40, 50 hours a week, and now you're throwing this on top of them. And now that there's kind of a time crunch, that we're up against the wall a little bit here for November, there's not enough people, right? They don't have enough time. They don't have enough staff to to delegate their own work, and they don't have the time to meet with us and do the work with us. So that is a big issue that we're also facing when we start working with companies.
Yeah, and I think when you again think about all this, right? Most organizations, it's the first time that they've gone through this type of project, right? So it can seem like a daunting task, and we understand that. So coming back from the assessor perspective, right? Again, thinking about the premise of certification is to protect CUI. So you're looking to prevent, detect, respond, and prove. How you're doing that within the certification. And this ties to really the flow of the assessment, what the auditors are looking for. So Chris, can you just touch on this briefly, kind of how it ties to protecting CUI, and then we're going to get into the assets and describe that a little bit more in detail. You can just share some comments on this.
Yeah, so what the auditors are really looking for when you're going through this audit is, one, are you really doing what you're saying you're doing? So is it, you're actually restricting access? So they want to see that. They want to see that in place. They want to make sure that, if they ask you pretty much on demand, you can go and get that evidence for them live. The other piece is they want to make sure that you're documenting it. And a big problem that we've seen, and what we've seen with auditors speaking to them, is companies have everything in place, but the documents is really where it's lacking. Right on that SSP, if you don't have every single assessment objective, and there's 320 of them, the auditor will automatically write it as a not met, because you haven't written it somewhere, even though you can prove for the next 30 hours just showing them evidence. It doesn't matter if it's not written somewhere. It's very important that you have both those pieces, because they check both for every single assessment objective, and sometimes multiple evidences per assessment objective as well.
Thanks, Chris. So when you're thinking about managing, storing, and protecting CUI, what encompasses that, right? And so there's a lot of words here on the slide. We'll share this with everyone here after, but there's specific CUI asset types, right? And perhaps Chris, I'll move to the next slide here to kind of give folks a visual of what that looks like. But can you describe some of these different CUI asset types and how that's tied to the CUI flow?
Yeah, so for CMMC level 2, there's 5. So there's the CUI assets. Those are very easy to find. They process, store, or transmit CUI. So anything that comes into contact with CUI automatically falls into your scope, and they will be assessed against the 110 security controls. The only ones that kind of are exceptions are specialized assets or security protection assets. So a specialized asset is an OT machine, IoT machine, CNC machining equipment, something that you can't go and start putting group policies and You can't join into a domain, you can't put internet, you can't do a bunch of stuff because it'll break that machine. So those fall under specialized assets, and they do not get assessed against all 110. They might get assessed against some, but again, you have to document why they're a specialized asset and what you can do and what you can't do. They're also very easy to find when you send your list of inventory to the auditors, and they see all of a sudden, every machine is Windows 11, and then you have a Windows 7 machine. It's the first question they ask is, why is this computer at Windows 7? And it's most of the time, it's a decommissioned machine that is just part of the list, or it's a specialized asset that only runs on Windows 7. And if you try to upgrade it, well, that machine goes right into the garbage. So that's one of the assets that don't get scrutinized too heavily by the auditors. And the other one is a security protection asset. So that's anything like a firewall, IDS, IPS, a SIEM. So any tools that protect CUI fall under that category and will not be assessed against all 110, but they want to make sure that they're properly configured as well. Then there's the easy one to figure out is the out of scope assets. So if it doesn't touch CUI, process, store, transmit, and is logically or physically separated from your environment, it's considered out of scope. The only exception is that if it's not physically or logically separated from your environment, it falls under risk managed asset, where it's in your boundary of your CUI, but it's not intended to communicate or touch or store CUI. But by accident, it might. So they will have some questions for you why you haven't separated it, and you have to have a really good answer why, because there's not many examples to why it should still be in in your CUI chart, if you can physically separate it or logically separate it.
What about remote users? So, a lot of the organizations we work with, they're manufacturers, they have on-premise infrastructure, perhaps hybrid. But they have people, business development folks visiting customers, traveling to trade shows, things like that. So how does this impact those folks?
Yeah, so part of the controls, in access control, but also in physical protection, they talk about alternate work sites, and they talk about remote access, right? So you can include it in the scope. We've done it on many occasions. What it does is it adds a couple more controls to look at rather than keeping them as non-applicable. So they can be in the scope if they touch or process or store CUI. What we recommend is, if you work remotely, like if you're doing a hybrid scenario, and the days that you're out of office, you don't touch CUI, and the days you're in office, you work on CUI, if that's a possibility, better you do that. But if it can't be done, it's not an issue. We'll put in the scope, and we'll put in the necessary controls.
Thanks, Chris. And I see some questions are popping up here, so thank you for that. We'll get to those. We'll come back to these at the end. We want to make sure we have enough time to get through the content here. So we understand that now. Mapping your CUI flow is critical. Identifying your CUI assets is critical. What happens if you don't do that?
Yeah, so the auditors will automatically assume everything is in scope. It's one of the first things that we do. When we start working with the auditor and we start working with you guys, is what is the scope? When you do that first meeting with the auditor, that's what you guys are there for. Determine what the scope is, what's in scope, what's out of scope. And they're not there to tell you, no, this has to be in scope, this has to be out of scope. It's you to decide. You need to know your infrastructure. Speaking to a lead auditor last week, he kind of mentioned to me that that first meeting when we meet, with our customers or with us or with anybody, if you're not sure of your scope, and I'm not sure of your scope is one thing, but if you have no idea where CUI is and you're just kind of like, hey, we need a certification, we don't know what our scope is, we don't know anything, they get a bad feeling immediately, and they take note of that. The confidence that you give in your answers resonate to your certification. If you're confident in your scope and you know what your scope is, and you come to them with a plan, and this is in scope, this is out of scope, and they're gonna ask you questions on okay, you don't have remote access, no, we don't have, we do this, we don't want this. you have all the answers for them on that first day. They go into that audit saying, okay, we know like this company knows what they're doing. This IT person knows what he's doing. He knows his environment. If you go to that first meeting, and this first meeting is months in advance, it could be 6 months, 8 months in advance. Um, they note it down, and if the auditor sees that um, your IT person has no idea what is going on, doesn't know what CMMC is, doesn't know what the scope is, can't identify how you receive CUI or anything like that, they note that down. And when it comes to the audit, they question everything because they believe that you have no idea what you did to get to this point.
I think that's a critical piece, right? Is that establishing what that flow is, and first and foremost, what CUI is, right? We see some organizations that don't necessarily touch CUI today, so they're not sure how this is going to be managed in their environment. And some organizations, have been working on defense contracts for 30 years and have, thousands of files that haven't necessarily been identified. And so, how do you manage and decipher that to meet compliance, right? But I think um, ultimately, if there's no clear scoping around all this, just time, efforts, and cost typically drive up, and it leads to more internal disruption. So, to get a little bit more granular on some of these challenges, we see, Chris, people that have, again, deploying a tool is great. Some of these are required to meet compliance, but if it's not managed properly, then that could lead to some challenges, right? So, kind of, what are some of the things that we see?
Yeah, so the biggest one we see is with the IDS IPS technology. A lot of times it comes with your firewall. Um, Companies like to give it for free. Say, here's an IDS IPS. It's activated. It's great. We're protecting your network. And then you dig a little bit deeper and realize that it's only the detection piece that's enabled, and the prevention piece you got to pay for it. Um, and they think that they have an IDS IPS deployed and they're secure, and all they're seeing is, yeah, these alerts are coming in. My tool is blocking everything, and it's just letting everything go through. It's something we see quite often. The other one is antivirus installed. You put Defender in place, but you don't put any deny rules. You let everything pass. You let everything go through because some people complained in the past and they couldn't get onto Facebook for some reason, or they couldn't go onto YouTube. So you started letting all that stuff go through, and you realize that now you have an antivirus that does nothing for your device. So those are the two biggest that we've seen.
I think another one too is logs, right? And I think this is a critical challenge because yes, there are logs for all these different CUI assets, right? But it's not centralized, it's not managed. So what are we seeing as it relates to the challenge for logs?
Yeah, so when you get into that domain with the auditor, the first thing they do is they want that list of the type of logs that you're collecting, right? So you send them all the event IDs from Windows that you're collecting, and then they will pick one or two randomly, and they'll ask you, open up your SIEM. We want to see these logs, that they took place. If you cannot produce them right away, the second that you can't produce a test during an audit, it's an automatic not met. Now, the only caveat to that is, they know that sometimes not all logs are there, but usually they tend to pick unsuccessful login attempts, or VPN connections, right? Things that are happening every day, or at least every couple of days. So there'll be a history of that. They're not going to go into something super specific that has never happened, and then they say, well, you failed because of that. So they will choose something usually quite easy to make sure that it was on your list and you're checking it. So it's not just that you have it in place, that it's centralized, but can you generate reports? Can they correlate between events? So that your team of analysts can go back and see what is going on. Is there a brute force happening across your network, or is it just somebody can't remember his password and he's entered it 14 times? They just want to make sure that your team has all the necessary information to make that conclusion.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, and this is one that we see a lot, right? And again, it comes back to managing and operating. Um, and then this kind of goes back to the poorly defined scope, right? But I think a lot of organizations struggle with, well, how and where are we going to store CUI, right? Because that's a critical piece too. So, are we using an enclave? Are we applying the scope enterprise wide so CUI can live anywhere? What are the biggest challenges that we see around this?
Yeah, so scoping is that exercise that tends to take a bit of time at the beginning. Now the difficulty with finding where your CUI is it's not tagged right now. I'm going to say about 90 to 95% of real CUI that is out there is not tagged CUI when you receive it. And it's not up to you to tag it unless you created it. So finding it in your system, or finding it and seeing, is this actually a CUI, is it not? There are a lot of questions that we go through relatively quickly in the process. The goal here with scoping is to build where your CUI is going to live, who's going to have access, and how are you going to access it, where do you get it, and if you send it to somebody, how do you send it? The rest after that can be built out. If you think that we're 10 devices that will have access to CUI, so 10 workstation or 10 laptops, and then we get to the end of the project and realize, oh wait, it was actually 15. It doesn't take that much time to add 5 people into the scope. Most companies are controlled goods right now, so the background checks are done. You go through a small training to know how to handle CUI. You put that user into the user group of CUI, and that's it, right? It doesn't take too much time. We don't want to spend too much time on identifying every single piece of hardware, of laptop, and everything that goes into place. We know there'll be laptops. We know there's going to be users. We know there could be 1, 2, 3 servers in place, or there could be no servers in place. Are you in the cloud? We want to know all these things to build a rough idea and then move the project ahead. And then when we get closer, as going through all these policies, we start to realize, okay, we need to add this to the scope. Okay, we add this to the scope. That's great. Okay, we need to make sure that printing are you printing CUI or not? Are you VPN access or not? You allowed USB keys or not? Those are the 3 biggest we want to know, because it changes for the auditor if they will come on site or not. Now, for every assessment, they're allowed to come on site. It is their right to come on site to verify that you're doing everything you say. But I would say most of the time, when you're not printing CUI, they will not come on site. We haven't seen one that they come on site and you haven't printed yet. So it's something to take into consideration. It doesn't necessarily add much more difficulty. You still have to put all the stuff in place. Just more stressful when the auditors come in place. People tend to mess up a little bit and say the wrong things. Decide that day that we're not going to follow procedure for some reason, and you fall out of compliance for that one day. So always good to know for you and for the auditor when they have to make your estimate, are they coming on site or not? What is the scope? Is it going to be relatively easy, or is it 6 different buildings across 3 different cities? Those are all things that they need to know.
And we've seen that, right? It's not every organization that goes through an audit every day. And so, you ask questions perhaps that you're not used to answer. So, clearly defining where that's being stored is critical. Chris, I know you touched on a few of the elements here. Maybe just touch on some that you didn't. And again, it's not about necessarily specific tools. It's about how you're managing these tools to proving that you're protecting CUI, right?
Yeah, so these are not all the technologies that are required for CMMC, but these are the ones that we noticed that companies are having issues with. Sometimes it's not too clear. The controls are not very clear either. So when we talk about MFA, so multi-factor authentication, it can't just be the same PIN over and over again. We've seen it with Windows Hello. You can put the same PIN over and over again. What they're looking for is replay resistant. So the PIN has to change. If you're using Microsoft Authenticator, Google Authenticator, the biometrics, Duo, anything like that, that the PIN changes every single time. That's what they want to see for MFA. Configurations, we talked a little bit about it. Tools, making sure that they're configured properly. So the endpoint tools, your network boundary tools that are configured properly, your logs are centralized. So it's one of the requirements of CMMC that everything must be centralized. And then we get to incident response capability. So this is the first thing that they will ask you when you get to incident response during the audit. So on 3.6.1a, the assessment objective is the company able to carry out their incident response capability? So they want to see your policies, they want to see your procedure, they want to see that you've tested it. Was the first thing that they're going to make sure that you can do, in that audit when you get to that domain. And the last one is encryption. Not every encryption works. Encryption here for CMMC has to be FIPS validated. So FIPS 140-2 or 3. I know -2 is kind of going extinct a little bit, and they're being replaced by -3 very, very soon. So if you have one or the other, it works. So standard BitLocker doesn't work. You can't just activate BitLocker in your device and it works. You have to enable FIPS first on the Microsoft device and then put BitLocker in place. So it's just little things like that that companies are not really aware of. They think that we have SHA-56 encryption and it's enough. It's not. It's not. It has to be FIPS validated. So the encryption method that you use is FIPS validated, which makes the encryption FIPS as well.
Get some good tips there. But just coming back to incident response capability, that's critical, right? Because there's certain reporting procedures around this. Again, we're talking about protecting sensitive data. So if you're able to identify if that data hasn't been accessed, how do you respond to that? And there's specific pieces around it. We're sharing here some of the documents that need to be prepared for the audit. The critical piece here is your system security plan that encompasses all these. I think Chris, you talked about some of these in detail, but what's the first thing that the auditor's going to want to see from a documentation perspective?
Yeah, so when the auditor asks you to send in documents, the first thing they want to look at is your SSP. Your SSP defines every single thing you do to close every single assessment objective. So they use that as their base. They will use that as your word, and everything you say in there is the truth. So if you say that you limit unsuccessful login attempts at 10 in your SSP, and then you turn around and in your policy that is supporting your SSP says we're at 5, they believe that you have no idea how your system works. They need to make sure that both of those numbers are at 10. And the same thing is if both policies, the policy and the SSP says 10, and when they go and look at your evidence and your GPO says 5, even though it is better to have it at 5 than at 10, they still believe that you have no idea what's happening in your network, and they will mark it as a gap. So it's very important, to make sure that SSP and the policy and your evidence all align. And the SSP is a document that they have open from morning till night, the whole week of the audit. They use it. Everything you say in that audit will be tested right up against your SSP. And you better make sure that you're saying the exact same thing that is on your SSP and not something different than what you say that you're implementing and what we're actually doing.
Yeah, we've done a webinar in the past with the C3PAO, so I invite you to check that out. This is a topic that we could discuss at great lengths and share some of our experience as well. But and this kind of ties into one of the questions too. But how do you choose which external service provider, ESP, you want to work with, right? The requirement as per CMMC is that they're NIST compliant. We would even recommend going a step beyond and looking for CMMC Level 2 certified MSPs or MSSPs. There's a directory that you can find that highlights all of these. To my knowledge, check last night, StreamScan is the only Canadian company that's part of this list. And so, again, it's critical that you identify the right ESPs to work with, because as we've discussed, it can be quite complex, and there's certain partners that you likely work with to manage certain pieces of this. So it's critical that they're in line to help support your certification process. So the critical piece tied to this is the shared responsibility matrix that clearly defines who's responsible for operating, monitoring, and evidencing controls around CMMC. We've done this for our own audit. We've done this for our customer audits that deploy our tools and services. So this provides a clear delineation of responsibility to the auditor of who's responsible for what. and that's clearly documented. So StreamScan is, as I mentioned, CMMC Level 2, and that's all our services, so our SOC and MDR service, all our cybersecurity tools, our incident response service, and it covers all our internal processes and security controls as well. And so what does that mean for yourself and your audit? You can, by working with an ESP that's CMMC certified when it comes to your audit, produce the ESP certificate. We have a 100% success rate in the audits that we've done. 5 certified customers so far, one being my HTT, that is a technology company that works with 20 of the largest aerospace manufacturers in the world. And as Chris mentioned, I think we're going through an audit this week with one customer, another one next week, and I think we'll have quite a few coming up to close out the year. So we have many references. Some of them are available publicly. We're happy to connect you with any of these folks that we've worked with if you want to have a conversation about their CMMC project or how we've supported them. So StreamScan can support you in several different ways. So our core business is our security operations center. What we do there is essentially we ensure the continuous monitoring of your environments, endpoints, networks, logs that we talked about, great lengths, emails, etc. We ensure that that's being actively monitored and protected. We do proactive threat hunting, and we support any collection of evidence that's tied to CMMC. And we can do that, again, with your tools where we manage and configure for compliance the tools that you have today, or we can deploy our own through our Stream Shield service and our cyber threat detection system, or CDS, that we've built through the CNRC, have used with projects with the DND, RCAF, the CSC, etc. And so the traditional model is just consulting. We've done 40 projects over the last 4 years. It's been in this typical consulting methodology where it's a little bit more specific and adapted to each and every customer. With our experience doing this and our ability to build technologies and understanding that reducing the scope for CMMC compliance project is critical, we've also developed an enclave strategy, whether that be for an on-premise networking environment or a cloud. Essentially, that significantly reduces the scope and therefore timeline and cost that are associated to this. And another critical piece is, we spoke about bandwidth challenge earlier. This puts more of the onus for compliance on StreamScan, where we're providing these policies and procedures and a lot of the evidence and documentations out of the box, so you don't have to do it. And so when it comes to supporting you through these projects, we can help you with the implementation and drafting of the policies. We can help deploy monitoring tools or an enclave. We have a platform to help us support this as well. That's in continuous development. We're really excited about some of the things we're building there. And when it comes to maintaining certification, so the certification is a triennial certification. It's 3 years once you have it. There's certain elements that you have to do to maintain and support that certification continuously. So we can support you through those activities, whether it be a tabletop incident response, simulation and report, helping you with reporting on the EMAS portal, reviewing your documentation, helping update it for any changes that may have been done. And recently, we've also developed the supply chain risk management program that we're really excited about, because the onus is on the OSA, or organization seeking assessment, that need to ensure that whoever they're sharing CUI within their supply chain is also ensuring that they're CMMC compliant. And so, think of an organization that has hundreds of suppliers. It's tough to manage. So we have a program where you can outsource that to the experts, being us, with our experience and the tools that we've developed here. A little short on time here, running at the end, but Chris, a couple of key takeaways here, and let's try and get to a question or two that we have.
Yeah, so 2 things that we would really like you to understand from this presentation is define your scope. The scope sets up your project for success. If you start off on the bad foot, it's going to take a lot longer, it's going to cost more, and you might lose out on some key projects. The other one is really pick a good partner, somebody that understands CMMC, that understands what it entails, that's been through an audit, that understands what the auditors are looking for, and a partner that's willing to work with you as an MSSP to help you put in some tools and make sure that they're going to stay compliant so it doesn't affect your certification as well.
Yeah, and there's no one size fits all of this, right? So having experience, having gone through this, having worked with different environments, whether it be on-prem, hybrid, cloud, et cetera, and some different business models, we can support any or all. So if you have any questions, there's a couple here we'll get to. We'll share this deck again, but reach out to us. Reach out to cmmc@streamscan.ai. You have Chris and I's email contacts here. And we're doing another webinar in a few weeks. This will be specific to IT, OT challenges that we're seeing in 2026 and what leaders need to understand to secure operations. So if you're in the manufacturing sector, this may resonate with you. So we'll share the link to register here. And so let's look at some of these questions here. I'll just go in reverse from what I see here, Chris. How can we manage CUI with the commercial Microsoft 365 tenant, specifically that 365 DoD is not available in Canada? That is something that we see quite a bit, right?
Yeah, that's a question that comes up quite a bit. So yes, you're not allowed to put CUI in the cloud unless you are on Microsoft GCC High, which is only available for a US person or US entity. So if you have that, great, you have access to it. It is super expensive. I've heard quotes up to $200,000 a year, and I've heard $50 a user per user. So if that's the route you want to go, great. If not, there's other solutions out there. We can walk through a few that we have. We have partners that we work with that are on the cloud that are certified to work in Canada. So we can help you with that, but you cannot put CUI on a commercial Microsoft 365 tenant.
Yeah, the critical piece that we know for CPCSC in Canada is that it needs to be hosted in Canada if you're using any cloud solutions. For a company that's never had CUI before, how can we determine the scope? So this one, I know it's a bit of a challenge, right? And so kind of what Chris mentioned earlier, right, is important to understand, okay, what is a CUI? So I think first and foremost now, as they roll this out, it's going to be clearly marked, right? So if you haven't had CUI before, then you don't have to go through the exercise of figuring out what's what. So it should be clearly marked for net new defense projects going forward. But our team is well versed in this and can help support figuring out what that is for you. Some of the more technical questions here from Jeff. What about ERP systems if it has parts numbers but not CUIs?
Yeah, so this is a question actually we get quite a bit. The more information you can take out of your ERP, the better. Now, part numbers are not necessarily CUI. They can be. It really depends on the part number that's created. Is that an internal piece or is it an external piece? If I take that part number as somebody that doesn't have access to CUI and I Google it, do I get an answer? Do I see what that piece is? Is it going to go on, on a weapon system, or is it just going to show up as nothing? Those are the determinations. See if it's actually CUI or not. The more information you can remove from your ERP, the better. If not, it puts your ERP in scope and it complicates a lot because there's a lot of people that have access to ERP that will not have access to CUI. The other thing is with ERP, sometimes it links systems together and you can link documents. You link the documents that are somewhere that is secure. Even if somebody doesn't have access and they try to click it, it'll tell them that they don't have access. So it's really about that part number. If they can search it up online and see that this is a CUI or it goes on a military piece or anything like that, they can figure out kind of what you're building. That's immediately a CUI, and then your whole ERP gets put in the system as your CUI asset, or you remove the part number completely, or you build new part numbers internally.
Thanks, Chris. If one were to partner with StreamScan, does that mean StreamScan will be available for the audit? The answer to that is yes. That is a support service that we can provide. Chris, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe with all the customer audits, or all our customers have gone through C3P audits so far, we have supported them through the audit, right?
Yep, we've gone through all of them. It's an option we give. We were there to help you the whole way. We're not gonna let go of your hand right as you're crossing the finish line. We're gonna be there in the meeting. We'll jump in if we need. There's some audits that we participate more than others, and there's some that we just sit back and make sure that the auditors are staying on track. It happens quite often that it's a conversation between you and the auditor. Sometimes it goes a little bit to the right, a little bit to the left, and you get off topic, and then they start asking a bit more questions. We just want to be there to make sure that they're not going too far out of the scope where they start asking you too many questions and realize, oh, this is not in place, but it's not in scope, and we didn't know that we can just tell them to come back in scope. So we're there if you need us. If you don't need us, great. We'll set you up anyways to pass, as best as we can. But if we're there, better for us to be there. We can, make sure the auditors stay on track, make sure that everything goes smoothly.
Yeah, we've seen that play out as the customer having us there has added value. So yeah, our job is to put you in the best possible position. I'm not going to say we're going to guarantee you be compliant, but pretty good success rate right now, 100%. And so you're in good hands if you are supported by StreamScan, and if you want us to accompany you through the audit, we can absolutely do that. I'll just summarize the last question quickly here. If there's any others, if folks want to stay on, we have a couple more minutes so we can address those. But basically, so if you're thinking about the evolution of an environment, right? So you draft your policies today, what your CUI flow is today. Now there may be some changes to that in the future, right? So how do you just address those changes? Do you need to build new POAMs? There's certain things you have to do throughout the triennial reporting period while you have to maintain that certification, Chris. So can you comment on that?
Yeah, so the only time that it kind of makes a difference is if you've already told the auditor, hey, we don't print any CUI, we don't work remote, and then you get to the day of the audit and you say, surprise, we do that. They're not going to like that. They'll probably push back the audit, to be honest with you. If that changes, you alert the auditor immediately. Now, if this happens after the audit, which is questions that we get quite often, hey, I wasn't using a VPN before, and we kind of want to do remote work a little bit. Are we allowed? In short, you're not. That scope is set for 3 years. So it's very important to know if you put something in scope, that it is in scope for 3 years, even if you decide never to use it again, right? You're using USB keys, and then you decide, you know what, we don't want to do this anymore, and you stop using it, you block it. It doesn't change it. You don't add anything to the scope. The only time that it makes a difference is when you add something to the scope that hasn't been assessed. So if you take out remote work, and you don't have remote access, and VPN is on scope, and they don't test VPN, the auditors will mark it as non-applicable on your certification when you get the list of the controls that are met and not applicable. And you can't take a control that's not applicable and decide that you want to apply it. You will need to be recertified for that control. So very important to make that determination if you want something in scope or not. But again, you have up until the audit day to do that. If it changes that you print, you let them know, hey, we're printing. We realized that we tried to take it out and it didn't work, so we're putting it back. And then you advise them so they're not surprised on the day of the audit.
And perhaps the last one here. Thanks for that, Chris. Is a SOC provider, if it's external, should be certified CMMC, or it's not an obligation? It's not an obligation. The obligation for your ESPs is for them to be NIST 800-171 compliant. So ultimately, the CMMC certification is just, there's a third party that's validating that compliance, right? And so when it comes to your audit scope, or to your audit, your C3PO is going to ask you about what ESPs you're working with. They'll ask you to produce any certifications that they have or proof that they're compliant. So if they are CMMC certified, very easy, produce their cert. Otherwise, Chris, kind of what would an auditor do to kind of validate an ESP's NIST compliance?
Yeah, so they look at the responsibility matrix is the first thing they'll look at. The second, you alert them that you have an external service provider. It'll be on a document that is provided to them at the beginning of the assessment. So about a couple weeks before, I would say about 6 weeks before, a month before. Then they'll ask you for a responsibility matrix, and then they want to see who's responsible to close this control. Is it you? Is it your ESP, or is it shared? And if it's shared or is from your ESP, they have to prove that they are certified. So not that they're certified, so that they have it in place. They have to give evidence, and they have to show, and they will probably have to be there in the meeting. Sometimes you can do it through documentation and it's enough, but sometimes they want to see the people in the meeting. The other point is if something happens in their system, so for whatever reason, you get hacked and CUI gets exfiltrated from your environment, and you must report this to the DoD. So you have to report it to your contracting officer. You have to report it to the DoD. They will do an investigation, and if they find that it came through your ESP, and they realize that the control that they put in place wasn't sufficient, the certification that gets lost is yours. It's the only one that's in the scope of that. So if for whatever reason they decide we're going to put this in place for the audit only, and then we're going to stop doing it because it complicates everything for us, and something happens and they find out that it was through them, you lose your certification, you're liable, and you will be dealt with, by the False Claims Act.
And I think we've seen a few of those being published here over the last few months. But yeah, I mean that's a critical piece here is making sure you're working with the right partners, advise your partners earlier on in this process, right, and then figure out if they're on board or not. And so again, StreamScan, we are CMMC Level 2 certified. We're the only one in Canada. If you're not working with us, highly recommend that you work with perhaps anyone else that's on that list. But critical to have this conversation with your external partners, whether an MSP, MSSP. So that's all the questions that we have. We're running up on time here, but I appreciate everyone's attendance here and taking time of your busy day to join us. I hope the information that we shared was helpful, added value. Chris, thank you very much for sharing your knowledge and experience here with everyone. And if you have any questions, you know where to find us. We'll follow up with a copy of the presentation and the webinar. And if you're looking for support or any help or have any remaining questions, feel free to reach out. We're happy to help. Thanks, everyone.